I found myself alone on the balcony, nursing a glass of wine and watching the string lights sway in the evening breeze, when Elena's mother stepped into the quiet. Her dress shimmered like champagne in the low light, but her eyes were all storm. She didn't look at me right away, just stood beside me, arms crossed, gaze fixed on the garden below where the wedding tent had just been set up. "You still have time to walk away," she said. "She's her father's daughter, through and through." I laughed, because what else do you do when the woman who's about to become your mother-in-law drops a line like that the night before your wedding? But I shouldn't have laughed. I really shouldn't have. Linda didn't smile. She just gave me a look that felt like a funeral eulogy in progress. And then she walked off, heels clacking like punctuation. I watched her go, then looked down at my ring. I should have felt proud, excited. Instead, I felt like I just heard a warning shot and ignored it. Elena and I had been together for almost 5 years. We weren't the kind of couple who fell fast. We built slow. We met at a friend's Halloween party, both accidentally dressed as characters from the same 90s sitcom. She made fun of my sneakers. I told her she had too much eyeliner. It was awkward, ridiculous, and the best beginning I could have asked for. She was ambitious, sharp-tongued in a way that was thrilling, and had this laugh that always felt like it came from someplace private, like she only really let you hear it when she wanted you to know she saw something special in you. Me? I'm just a guy who runs a small architecture firm. I like quiet mornings and single malt scotch. I'm not flashy. Never have been. But I make things that last, and I thought our love was one of those things. Turns out, I was wrong. The warning signs weren't loud. They were quiet. Surgical. Like how she started locking her phone around the time we finalized the seating chart. Or how she pushed for a prenup even though neither of us had real money, just in case, she said. Or how she got weirdly defensive when I asked about her father. That one was always a sore spot. Elena talked about him like he was both myth and mistake. Said he left when she was a teenager, came back years later trying to play savior, then disappeared again. Linda says he's poison, she told me once. But she still lets him back in when it's convenient. I never met him. Not once. He wasn't invited to the wedding. At least, not as far as I knew. But that night, that balcony, Linda's words stayed in my head like a riddle I didn't want to solve. She's her father's daughter. What did that mean? At the rehearsal dinner, Elena was radiant. Effortless. She laughed loud and leaned into me like nothing could touch us. Everyone said we looked perfect. That we made sense. That we were goals. But later, when the guests left and the staff packed up, she pulled away during a quiet moment and said she wanted to sleep at her mom's place that night. Tradition, she said. One last night apart. Like it's bad luck or something. I smiled. Said okay. Kissed her cheek. Watched her drive off. But as I stood in the empty house, surrounded by roses and leftover desserts, I had this sinking feeling in my gut. The kind of feeling you can't explain. The kind of feeling that knows before your brain catches up. At midnight, I poured another glass of wine and sat in the den, scrolling through photos we'd taken over the years. Birthdays. Vacations. That blurry one of her at the beach, laughing with wind-tangled hair. God, I loved her. Still did. But that didn't change the feeling. That slow, creeping sense that something was off. That maybe Linda's warning wasn't bitterness, but prophecy. I didn't know it yet, but by this time tomorrow, the altar would be empty. And I'd be standing in a tux I never wanted to wear again, with a choice I never thought I'd have to make. And the truth? She was her father's daughter. And I was about to find out what that really meant. The morning of the wedding felt unreal. Not magical, not jittery, just off. Like I was walking through someone else's dream in my own skin. The sun was out, the flowers were flawless, and the groomsmen were buzzing with good-natured teasing and coffee breath. But I couldn't shake it. That sense that I was moving towards something I couldn't see, but would change everything. A few days earlier, Elena had started getting strange calls, always from a blocked number. She'd decline them without a word, then smile like nothing happened. I asked once. She said it was some vendor who wouldn't quit. And then there was the photo, one from her 10th birthday, missing from our album. The frame was still there. Just empty. Probably fell behind the shelf, she told me. But her voice had that rehearsed calm, the kind people use when they're lying mostly to themselves. That sense that I was moving towards something I couldn't see, but would change everything. Ryan, my best man, handed me a sealed envelope while we were getting ready. From your fiancé, he said with a smirk. Probably a love note. Or a final warning. I laughed and took it, brushing off the chill that ran down my spine. Inside, there was a single handwritten sentence. I'm sorry. Just that. No name. No explanation. Just those two words, quiet, aching, and already half goodbye. I tucked it into my jacket pocket and tried not to let it bother me. But it did. Because sometimes an apology comes before a wound, not after. The venue was gorgeous, a garden estate with ivy-covered stone walls and enough candles to light a cathedral. Guests arrived dressed to the nines, humming with the usual wedding day chatter. The music started. The seats filled. My mother gave me that proud little smile moms reserve for moments they've imagined since you were in diapers. And then, the delay started. 10 minutes. Then 15. Whispers floated like smoke through the crowd. I kept checking my watch. Ryan checked the aisle like he expected someone to sprint in with answers. Finally, someone did. Not Elena. A man. Older. Well-dressed. Uninvited. He didn't walk up to me directly, just stood at the back of the ceremony space, arms crossed, eyes locked on mine. Then he did something that made my skin crawl. He smiled. And in that instant, I knew who he was. I'd seen the photo. Recently. Found it tucked inside Elena's bag, same one that vanished from the bookshelf a week earlier. She was maybe 10 in it, arms looped around this man's neck, both of them laughing like the world hadn't cracked yet. This was him. Her father. The man she said was gone. The man who came back like a whisper she couldn't shake. I turned away without another word. Back down the aisle. Past the confused stares. Past the harpist who had started playing again out of sheer nervous habit. Ryan met me halfway, eyes wide. What the hell just happened? He asked, voice low but urgent. I didn't stop walking. She's gone, I said. Left before the ceremony. What do you mean gone? I didn't answer right away. We stepped into the main hall, the place where the reception was supposed to be. Tables already set. Flowers already dying a little in their vases. She asked him to tell me, I finally said. Ryan frowned. Him? That guy. Her father. Ryan froze. Wait, the one she never talks about? I nodded. He ran a hand through his hair. Jesus, man. I walked to the drawer where I'd stashed my vows. Opened it. The paper was still there. Neatly folded. Hopeful. Handwritten. Honest. Naive. I tore them in half without reading them. We didn't announce it formally. The guests figured it out fast enough. My mom tried to comfort me, but I couldn't take it. Ryan called for the shuttles to take people back early. The DJ stood by awkwardly, holding a playlist no one would dance to. And me? I went home. Alone. The house was too quiet. And there it was, the photo frame. Still on the bookshelf. Still empty. I hadn't thought about it in days. But now, standing there in my wrinkled tux with the taste of goodbye still sharp in my throat, I saw it for what it was. A warning I didn't understand at the time. A piece of her past that went missing just before everything else did. The fridge still had wedding cake samples in it. My tux jacket was already creased from the weight of the envelope still in the pocket. And sitting on the kitchen table, exactly where she'd left it, was a letter. Not mailed. Not texted. Just left. I didn't touch it right away. I sat in the chair we used to fight over when watching movies. The one that leaned too far back. The one she always called hers. And I stared at that letter like it might breathe if I looked long enough. Then I opened it. I unfolded the letter with hands that weren't quite steady. My name was written in her handwriting on the outside, soft, curved letters like she used on Christmas tags and birthday cards. But this didn't feel like a gift. It felt like an autopsy. The first line was gentle. Too gentle. Luke, if you're reading this, then I wasn't brave enough to stay. That sentence alone hit harder than anything I'd ever read. I had imagined so many things, arguments, regrets, maybe even infidelity. But not this. Not running. You didn't do anything wrong. You were kind. You were good. You were safe. And I know what that sounds like an insult dressed as a compliment. But it's not. You gave me a version of love that didn't need fixing. And that scared me. I sat there, letter trembling in my grip, reading a goodbye from a woman who had told me, 2 weeks ago, she wanted to grow old with me. There's something I never told you. About my father. That's when the words got colder. She said she hadn't spoken to him in years. Said he vanished after burning every bridge. But that wasn't the truth. Not even close. He came back. 3 months ago. Found me. Said he'd finally figured out what mattered. I didn't tell you because I knew what you'd say, that people like him don't change. But I needed to see for myself. My chest tightened. We met for coffee. Just once at first. Then again. Then more often. And the thing is, he didn't try to be a father. He tried to be a mirror. I didn't understand that line. Not right away. He told me I was like him. That I'd marry you, and then one day wake up suffocating. That I'd pretend it was enough, smile through it. and slowly hate myself for it. He said I had two choices: leave now or destroy us later. That's when I understood. The look Linda gave me on the balcony. The way Elena pulled away after the rehearsal dinner. They all knew. I didn't want to believe him. But the closer the wedding got, the louder his voice became. Not just his, mine too. Twisting what was good into something fragile. Whispering that I was pretending. That I was a guest in a life too steady for someone like me. That night after the rehearsal dinner, when I said I'd sleep at Mom's, I wasn't at her place. I drove around for hours. Ended up parked outside a motel. Just sitting there, thinking about walking in, about leaving everything without a note. But I didn't. Not yet. Because part of me still wanted to be the version of me you saw. Maybe your love deserved someone who didn't flinch. Someone who didn't feel like she was faking it when everything was quiet and safe. I thought I could become that woman. I really did. But the truth is, I don't know who I am when I'm not running. And I couldn't risk finding that out by breaking you along the way. And then, the final blow. I saw him this morning. He was the one who convinced me to go. She ended it with a line that felt like a whisper after a scream. Don't wait for me. Don't hate me. Just remember the parts of me that were real. Because they were. I promise you they were. I stared at the page until the ink blurred. The woman I was supposed to marry had spent months building a future with me, while secretly auditioning the past. Letting a man who had abandoned her once, and left scars she never fully showed me, narrate the ending of our story. I thought I'd feel rage. But what I felt was something different. Grief. Not just for what we lost, but for what she clearly never believed she deserved. The next morning, I went to see Linda. I didn't call ahead, just showed up. She answered the door in a bathrobe, eyes red like she hadn't slept. And when she saw me, she didn't fake a smile or offer some trite condolence. She just stepped aside and let me in. Why didn't you stop her? I asked, sitting in the same chair where Elena and I had once flipped through floral arrangements with her mother chiming in on every detail. Linda sighed. Because I've been her mother long enough to know when she's already gone. She left me a letter. She nodded like she already knew. I pulled it from my coat and placed it on the table between us. I don't need to read it, she said. I know what she wrote. She practiced some of it with me. The rest she kept to herself. She mentioned her father. I said carefully. Linda's expression darkened. He called me, you know. Said he was coming to the wedding. Said he wanted to walk her down the aisle. My stomach turned. I told him no, she said. But she already invited him. I didn't even know until yesterday. So he showed up, to break it. Linda didn't answer that. Just looked down at her tea. You said something to me the night before. I reminded her. She's her father's daughter. She met my eyes then, and what I saw wasn't malice. It was regret. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I was trying to tell you she scares herself sometimes. The parts of her that she can't control, the restlessness, the need to run, she got those from him. And when he reappeared, it flipped a switch I'd spent a decade trying to keep off. I didn't know what to say. Linda poured more tea, even though neither of us would drink it. She loved you, she added. Still might. But some people mistake love for a cage when they've only ever known it with bars. When I left, the sun had started breaking through the clouds. It felt wrong, somehow. Like the sky should match what I felt inside. But grief doesn't ask the world to stop. It just asks you to survive the parts where you wish it would. And me? I was about to start the slow, quiet work of surviving something that never should have broken. 2 weeks after the wedding that wasn't, I got a call from the venue. They said there was a box left behind, marked with our names. They hadn't touched it, figured I might want to pick it up myself. I told them I'd be there by noon. The woman on the phone sounded surprised I didn't ask what was in it. Truth was, I didn't want to know. I drove over in silence. No music. Just the sound of tires on pavement and the steady hum of questions I hadn't dared ask until now. What had she packed in that box? What piece of her did she leave behind? When I got there, the receptionist handed it over with a small nod, like she already knew I was walking through a graveyard. The box was light, taped neatly, and covered in her handwriting. For Luke, scrawled across the top. I didn't open it at the venue. I waited until I got home. Sat at the kitchen table. Same spot where I read her letter. Same room where I first told her I wanted to grow old with her. Then I opened the box. Inside, there were 3 things. A Polaroid of us from our 2nd anniversary, laughing, wine-drunk, candlelight reflected in her eyes. The engraved compass I'd given her on our 3rd Christmas. The one that said, no matter where. A small leather-bound notebook. Hers. She never let me read it before. I turned to the first page. It started months before the wedding, before the girls' trip, before the dress fittings and vendor meetings and seating charts. Sometimes I look at him and wonder what would happen if I told the truth. The whole truth. Would he love me less? Would he leave? Or would he stay and never really trust me again? I kept reading. Each page peeled back another layer I hadn't seen or hadn't wanted to see. She wrote about waking up in the middle of the night, feeling like she was living someone else's life. About rehearsing smiles in the mirror. About how much she envied my certainty. How she wished she could borrow it, just enough to silence the voices in her head that kept saying, "Run." And buried in the middle of those pages, one entry stood out. He's reached out again. My father. Says he's clean. Says he's changed. I want to believe him. I want to believe people like him can come back from the places they disappear into. Last week, he sent me an old photo of us, me at 10, arms around his neck, both of us smiling like none of it had happened yet. The frame was missing for days before I found it in my bag. I didn't remember putting it there. I think he's trying to pull me back. And the worst part is, I don't know if I want to resist. I don't trust myself not to follow him there. That's when I understood something I hadn't been ready to admit before. She wasn't just scared of me. She was scared of becoming him. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat with that notebook in my lap, reading and rereading her doubts. Not out of punishment. Not because I was still trying to make sense of what she'd done, but because part of me, a part one hadn't let speak until then, still loved her. And loving her meant facing the truth. She hadn't left because she didn't love me. She'd left because she thought she would ruin me if she stayed. The next day, I did something I hadn't done since she disappeared. I drove to the storage unit we'd rented together, the one where we kept boxes of old books, childhood mementos, stuff we didn't have space for in the apartment. She had the key. Or so I thought. But when I got there, the lock had been changed. I asked the attendant if Elena had been by. She checked the logs. No, she said. But someone else was. She showed me the signature. Her father. I stood there for a long time, staring at that name. No first name. Just the last, the same one Elena used to write on job applications before she took mine. And suddenly it clicked. The photos that went missing from our photo albums. The envelope that felt too light when I picked it up from the venue. The sharp edge of her final note. He wasn't just advising her. He was interfering. Maybe even controlling. And worse, maybe he wasn't done. I made a decision that day. I wasn't going to chase Elena. Not out of pride. Not out of pain. But because I couldn't fix what she was still breaking inside herself. What I could do was protect the version of me that survived this. The one that still believed in commitment. The one that still believed in love. But now, a quieter, steadier kind. The kind that doesn't ask you to pretend. I went home, changed the locks, took her name off the lease, folded the notebook closed and placed it in a drawer I rarely opened. And then I picked up the compass, held it in my hand like it might still point me somewhere real, somewhere steady, somewhere she couldn't follow. The compass sat on my nightstand for weeks after that. Most nights, I didn't touch it. I just looked at it, that small, silver disc with the engraving still so crisp on the back it might as well have been etched yesterday. No matter where. A promise. Or maybe a prayer. Now it just felt like a punchline. Some mornings I'd catch myself reaching for it out of habit, the way you reach for a hand that isn't there anymore. Then I'd stop. Let it sit. You don't realize how much a person fills your world until they leave and the air still holds their outline like steam on a mirror. I didn't hear from Elena. Not for a long time. But I did see her once. It was about 6 weeks after the wedding. I was grabbing coffee at that little corner cafe where we used to go Sunday mornings, the kind with chipped mugs and too loud jazz. I'd gone out of routine more than anything, like muscle memory hadn't caught up to heartbreak. And then she walked in. Hair longer. Eyes tired. No makeup. No armor. She didn't see me right away. Ordered her drink. Reached for her wallet. I thought about slipping out, pretending this didn't have to happen. But something in me needed to know. When she turned and saw me, she froze. Didn't smile. Didn't cry. Just looked at me like I was a ghost she hadn't invited. I nodded. She stepped closer. Slowly. Like she wasn't sure the floor would hold. Hey, she said. Hey. That's all we said at first. Just that one word, filled with everything else we didn't know how to say. She glanced at the seat across from me. I gestured toward it. She sat. We didn't talk about the wedding. Not right away. We talked about small things, her new job, my projects. Neutral territory. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. I was going to mail this, she said, sliding it across the table. But since you're here, I opened it right there. Inside was a photo not of us, but of her and her dad, taken years ago from what I could guess. She looked maybe 16. He was laughing, arm around her shoulder like they were friends instead of family. On the back, she'd written, "This is the version of him I kept chasing." I looked up. She was watching me carefully. "I thought if I found that version of him again," she said, "I could prove I wasn't broken, that I didn't need saving, that I chose you for the right reasons, not just because you were the opposite of him." "You don't owe me this," I said quietly. "I do," she said, "because I left you with a question I never answered." She paused. "Was it real?" I didn't say anything. I was terrified. "Look," she went on, "you made me feel safe. And then I started wondering if safety was the same as love. If I just built a life with someone because he didn't hurt me. And then my dad came back, and suddenly every fear I thought I'd buried came clawing back up. I thought leaving would protect us both. But it didn't," I said. She shook her head. "No, it just hurt us differently." There was a long silence after that. Not awkward, just full. "Finally," I said, "I found the notebook." She blinked. "You read it?" I nodded. "All of it." Her eyes glistened, but she didn't wipe them. I was afraid of that. I'm glad I did. Why? Because it made me stop blaming myself. She let out a breath, shaky, but real. "I don't want to come back," she said, looking down at her coffee. "I'm not here to ask for that." "I know, but I want you to know. I'm trying. I'm in therapy. I'm figuring out who I am outside of you. I don't know if that means anything now, but it does," I said, and meant it. She nodded. "That compass. I left it on purpose. You gave it to me to remind me that love could anchor you, even when you feel lost. I wasn't ready to carry that, but you were." We sat there in that quiet cafe, two people who had almost built a life together, now just trying to make peace with the blueprint. Eventually, she stood. I didn't ask for her number. She didn't ask for another chance. She left, but this time, she didn't run. That night, I opened the drawer one last time, pulled out the compass, held it in my palm until the metal warmed. And for the first time since she left, I didn't feel haunted. I felt released. 3 months after the wedding, the invitations were still pinned to my fridge. Not because I couldn't let go, but because I needed the reminder of how close I came to building a life on fault lines, of how easy it is to mistake love for timing, for habit, for hope. One day, I took them down, one by one, slipped them into a shoebox labeled before. I didn't burn them, didn't rip them up in some dramatic fit, just folded them gently, like saying goodbye to a version of myself I didn't need to be anymore. That was the day the silence changed. It stopped feeling hollow, started feeling like space. I poured myself into work, not as an escape, but as a rebuild. My firm landed a new contract, a public library redesign in the next town over. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest, grounded, something people would use, would grow in. I like that. There was this intern on the team, Megan. Bright, bold, asked too many questions and didn't apologize for it. Reminded me a little of how Elena used to be, before the fear got louder than her love. Megan wasn't anything like her. That's not why I noticed her. I noticed her because she listened with her whole face. Because when I mentioned an old jazz record I liked, she found a copy and left it on my desk with a sticky note that just said, "For rainy days." We never dated, but she reminded me that people still surprised you in quiet ways. That connection didn't always have to be chaos. One evening in late October, I visited the venue again. Not for a wedding, for closure. It was open for a fall event, candlelight tours, warm cider, strings of lights in the trees. I walked the grounds slowly, hands in my jacket, letting the air sting a little. I stood on the hill where we were supposed to say our vows, watched the sky bruise orange and purple, and I thought about what I would have said if we'd made it there. I promised to hold space, not just your hand. I promised to see the version of you you hide when you're scared, and to love her too. That promise? I still meant it. Just not for her anymore. For the next person. The one who shows up without a ghost in their passenger seat. A week later, I ran into Linda again. Grocery store. She was buying flowers, lilies, I think. She looked older, like she'd aged a decade in months. But when she saw me, she smiled. Soft. Earnest. "I heard you're doing well," she said. "I'm doing." She reached into her purse and handed me something. It was a photo. Elena, standing by a small cabin in the woods, arms crossed, hair tied back. She looked settled. Still uncertain, maybe, but rooted. "She's in Maine," Linda said. "Volunteering at a wellness retreat. Off the grid, mostly. No men. No makeup. Just learning how to be still. I nodded. Didn't ask for more. She asked me to tell you thank you, Linda added. For what? For not making her the villain, even when she thought she deserved to be. That night, I took the compass one last time. Stepped out onto my porch, held it up to the moonlight. Let it catch the stars on its glass. Then I placed it in a wooden box, the same one that held my grandfather's watch, my childhood baseball cards, and a note my mom wrote me on my college graduation day. I didn't lock it away. I just put it to rest, because I finally understood. You can love someone and still walk away. You can forgive them and still never open the door again. You can carry their memory without carrying their shadow. The wedding didn't happen, but a kind of marriage did. Between me and the man I almost lost in the wreckage. The version of me that still believes in good things. In true things. In slow burning, no secret, eyes wide open kind of love. And if that love finds me again someday, I won't need to wonder if she's running. Because this time, I'll see her walking toward me. Steady. Certain. Empty-handed, but open. And I'll know I'm home. No matter where.